All right. Well, thanks, James, for popping in. We've got James and Carly here on the Conscious Couch. And since we're all sitting in our own spaces these days, we thought we'd bring together some pretty amazing human beings to share their stories and journeys. And a lot of us have had battle scars along the way. And a lot of the time they're, I guess we'd say, more mental battle scars. But James, you've probably had both the physical and mental battle scars from your journey and your background. Can you just share a little bit about, I guess in this time of need when we're all going through this upheaval and change and incredibly heavy time for a lot of people, your story, where you've come from and where you've arrived at, and why you think that might also be of benefit and help to people that are experiencing some tough times right now?
Got you. A really quick snapshot. So I grew up on a farm. Dad was also a priest as well as a farmer, chaplain to the Army, Police and Country Fire Authority, and Mum taught for 36 years at the local Roman Catholic school. So I grew up in every single conservative paradigm you possibly could imagine. I shipped off to boarding school at 14 because otherwise Dad and I would have killed each other. And within 4 weeks, Dad and I become best friends. Age of 18, straight out of school into the military, served for 17 years as an Army officer, was given the honour of leading over 100 soldiers into Iraq, where numerous things happened. But I suppose one of the most poignant ones was being myself hit by a roadside bomb. And the bomb was removing 66% of all fatalities in Iraq at the time. There's realistically no logical reason why I'm still awake or alive in front of you, except they put too much explosive in the bomb, it fractured apart, and I survived. So I'm an anomaly in many, many ways. Matter of fact, I was hit by the bomb in the shadow of the ziggurat of Ur, a 6,500-year-old temple to the moon god Ur, where Moses supposedly brought the Ark of the Covenant back to. We're talking seriously powerful land in Mesopotamia.
Oh, wow.
Well, it hasn't started yet. The story hasn't started because in that instant I was hit 12,000 kilometres away. My firstborn daughter, Abby, woke up screaming and screamed for 45 minutes unconsolably. Kirsty rushes in, picks her up, does what any awesome mum does, checks for food, checks nappy, nothing. Took her back and ended up, just falling asleep with her over a period of time in her own bed. She didn't know what happened, and it was only about 48 hours later when I finally got on the phone, we pieced everything together. Wow. But when I got back, I came back physically, but I didn't come back emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. And when I got back, Kirst said, "Do you want to have another child?" Now, we weren't great friends before I left, but being hit by a roadside bomb, not the worst day in Iraq. Waking up and realising what I'd done to my relationship before I went away because I was afraid of being a dad. I didn't know if I could survive as a commander of 110 soldiers with all those responsibility on my shoulders. So I ran to work and I immersed myself in it. And so we became emotionally caged beings, just cohabitating before I deployed. So everything turned around 2.5 months in when I saw my relationship with Kirsty through her eyes one morning. And I woke up gutted, just like crazy talk. And I didn't know what to do. So I started to reach out to her. I realised why there was nothing on the end of the phone. And so coming home, now fast forward to the point of the bomb, 23rd of April, 2007, 6:10 local time. In that period afterwards, and Kirsty found out about it, she was the only one in a time of war. I was the most senior guy hit in such an incident like that in southern Iraq. So it created quite a lot of storm back in Australia. And people running around, a fury. And everyone just going, James could have died, James could have died. Kirsty said he survived. And there's a grand canyon of difference between those two statements. Mm-hmm. If you think of paradigm when we're looking at, a lot of chaos and uncertainty at the moment, there was a lot of uncertainty back then. Kirsty's paradigm provided direction for both of us. And so when, I'm coming home after my tour, and she says two things. Firstly, there might not be any intimacy when you get back. And two, Abby might not recognise you. And what I realised is that meant, I'd lost connection to my wife. That's what intimacy meant to me. Although back then I still thought with, other parts of my body, and I thought, bugger it, there's no bedtime either. But what that really meant to me was was that I didn't have a connection. And that also meant she didn't trust me. And so at a subconscious level that I was having it reflected back, I didn't necessarily trust myself that I was going to be this person I thought I'd be. And she said that Abby might not recognize me. So who am I as a father? So now fast forward another 7 weeks and I go at a subconscious level, made a choice to go into post-traumatic stress. And that took me through another journey of about 18 months before I was able to work my way, or 12 months before I put my hand up and said, enough's enough. My family walking around on eggshells, me hitting things, acting out a lot of anger, not really understanding what was going on for me, excelling at work. They wanted to promote me and keep me going. I was on promotion courses left, right and centre. So I get to this point where I realise I can't even bath my own daughter. And things had to change. So, Abby was experiencing so much. And then 12 months to the day I got hit by the roadside bomb, Penelope Jane Greenshields comes in the world. Mm. So my daughters, they intimately know that Abby knows she's the one who helped me learn that big lesson. She didn't want a general. She just wanted a dad. Mm. And I knew how to be a general. I didn't know how to be a dad. Interesting thing, that. And Penny came to acknowledge the universal great spirit or whatever's out there, just acknowledging that part of my journey. And she's also come to teach me a shed more lessons, but as do children. So, I'm an anomaly in that I've never had a relapse of post-traumatic stress or depression, although I got to the point of almost taking my own life when I left the military. I sat on the couch and I said, I'm just bringing too much pain to everyone I love. I've got to leave. Now, in that moment, conversation with Dad came back for me, which was when I was feeding out some Angus cattle, black Angus cattle at the back paddock. We were on this 1974 Toyota Land Cruiser tray back, and we've got the Angus cattle out the back of us. And Dad was an interesting guy, fascinating from all, just knew things from different aspects. But he looked off into the bush and he just absorbed himself for a moment and he said, "There's my God." I've done all the confirmation classes and the religious instruction and stuff like that, and that didn't compute. I wasn't spiritually mature enough to actually have a conversation, but thankfully I shut up for a moment. And he looked down at me, looked me in the eyes, he said, "But you got to go and find your own." And so when I sat on the couch, almost taking my own life, that conversation came back to me. So I don't call it a journey of recovery or anything, although if the clinicians get their hands on me, they attempt to say something like post-traumatic growth, because I don't have a negative emotional reaction to the trauma. There's no trauma anymore. Actually, I've got a positive reflection upon the whole scenario. Been hit by a roadside bomb, 4th best day of my life, made me wake up to my priorities in life. Mm. So I've moved through all that. There's no attachment to any of that anymore. I call it my journey home to understanding who I really am and therefore living according to that.
So it's a kind of...
Sorry?
No, you go.
It was an awakening sitting on the lounge.
Yeah, a massive awakening. Yeah, and I'd already put my hand up and I'd already been asking for help and I'd already been doing an incredible emotional work. And the depression even went deeper than when I was before. I just left the military. I was not good at setting my own personal self-direction. I defaulted to the military's direction, even though I was an officer. I could organise teams of hundreds and hundreds of people and send them off in a direction, but generally that was within a larger architectural framework. Sitting there and working for myself was like...
Oh, that would have been easier than working through your own stuff.
Hell yeah. Because remember, also, you'll only heal as large or as far as the tribe allows you to heal, which is one of the reasons why organisations like the military struggle.
You also said something there about that the post-traumatic stress was a subconscious choice.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I flagged that one as well.
Can you dive into that, because I think that's really interesting.
So it's critical to understand the language too, because you guys in understanding meditation and teaching it so beautifully will get this. When the conscious mind is less than 10% of our mental capacity, and then we go into our subconscious and unconscious. So our subconscious mind, it works on images and emotions, which is why if I close my eyes and remember going to the beach, then I'll be flooded with, a visual experience, a sensory experience, 5 senses: sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. And that's then encased or wrapped in an emotion. Now, that remember, sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. So on about 6 months after getting back from Iraq, we're traveling in a hot day in Brisbane in a maxi cab. I'm already feeling it because I'm sitting on that bench seat which faces away from the driver. So I'm feeling out of control, and the trauma had really started to kick in by this stage. So I'm already having a hard time making sure that my family don't know what's going on for me. And then all of a sudden through the window comes this smell of hot asphalt. Now in Iraq, when you came to a population centre, you would start waving, and you always, in these areas, you always smelled hot asphalt because it was 63 degrees in the shade when I landed in Iraq. I didn't know the bloody world got that hot. and so I had always smelt this scent coming into a population centre, and you'd wave to people, and if they didn't wave back, you'd immediately switch all your safety catches off and you'd get ready because you were going into a hostile zone. And so that smell came in, triggered that emotional response without any cognitive recognition, because smell bypasses your neocortex, goes straight to your limbic region, your emotional centers. And it sparked an incredible emotional anxiety attack. I'm doing everything I can to stay inside the maxi cab instead of jumping out at 60 kilometers an hour. So what happens at a subconscious level is the trauma is embedded with the negative emotions. So all the bomb and everything surrounding that's the image, the sensory image, and the negative emotions wrapped in that. And so the emotion hadn't had a chance by conscious intervention to unravel from the image within the space of time that I got back to 7 weeks. And everything else in my life has started to unwind, unravel. Like I had sciatica in my left hip and leg. And I'd seen chiropractors before going to Iraq, and it disappeared 3 weeks before I left. And it came back a month after I got back because everything started to unravel. And that's when I found a yoga teacher and yoga became, and physical yoga particularly, as opposed to running and gym, yoga particularly because of the other elements to what yoga was, became a main pillar in my recovery plan. But to go back to that question, it's that unraveling of the emotion at the subconscious level, which then allows you to actually remember. And I can recite it. Well, the reason why I can remember the incident so well is because I get asked to tell the story so often. Whereas, if you started to ask questions around the incident, I'd have forgotten it because it hasn't really come up too much.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
With that, James, obviously there's that concept of sometimes the worst thing we go through can often become that burning light, and through the fractures the light comes in. Is that kind of one of the things where almost a parallel for, I guess, some people that today might see that what's playing out is probably one of the worst things that can happen? And if you look at a movie, like if you looked at that movie just when you're getting blown up and that 4 weeks after, you'd look at that and go, that's a pretty horrible story. But if we look at the whole picture before and after, and that sequence of events that plays out, that'd be one of those beautiful pivotal moments between you then becoming and moving on to the person, and again making that conscious decision to evolve rather than return back to, I guess, that stress state. Is there parallels that people can take from your journey from that, again, and looking at the darkness or whatever they're feeling right now? Because I also assume that you would have been living a lot of time in that stress, fight or flight state back in then. Is that a safe assumption? And a lot of people today are probably living in that, especially with what's going on right now, and looking at the media and all this constant projection of fear, panic and worry is probably playing into that. So I guess where would some parallels that people can probably take from your journey, and what was it that you then did to then go, okay, well, how can I move forward and heal? And again, because if we, as you said, a lot about that brain, if we stay in that stress state of fear, panic and worry, we lose our intelligence. Our prefrontal cortex goes offline. And people are just going to be operating out of the old tribal mind and us versus them and fear and panic. So how did you go from such a dark period to then recalibrating to become the awesome human being that you are today?
The pain of the present moment has to exceed any perceived pain that change may bring for an individual, a family, a community, or an organisation to change. And our level of human consciousness at the moment, fear is still a primary motivator. We're shifting, and it is coming more into love, etc. But it's still in the contractive emotion. I don't call them negative emotions, I call them contractive. And the reason why they're labelled a negative emotion is look at the 6 o'clock news, you know, and I've done studies on this by, not only that, I was in the military, I was trained in a thing called information operations, which is to how to get inside your enemy's mind and use everything from the media, etc. So when I look at media stuff now, I'm giggling because it's so obvious what's actually been, and I teach my daughters this. The only time we'll turn the 6 o'clock news on is to actually do a lesson in all the different things that you've been impacted by emotionally, so that they can sit there and dissect that whole thing through critical thinking. But what was I saying? Brain fart moment. What's the parallel today? Yeah. So we are being bombarded at the moment, and what you think of that bombarding and why you think they're doing it doesn't matter. In the moment, the person is having these impactful issues, and it's coming from social media, it's coming from mainstream media. If you look at it, we don't have mainstream TV in the house. We haven't for about 7 years now. Kirsty hasn't really watched the news since I went to Iraq, and she had to turn it off because it was just too much for her way back then. I went in 2007. So, and lots of people around us say, don't disconnect from reality. Well, got to come back to this understanding is that we create our own reality. David Bohm and his whole experiments, which proved that the observer dictates what's observed through particle or wave theorem in quantum physics, actually beautifully describes this. How we perceive a situation will either ignite us in stress or ignite us in gratitude and love. Two people can look at exactly the same situation, one walk away traumatized, one walk away so grateful. So in that moment, I sat on the couch. I was also reading a book called Man's Search for Meaning by
Viktor Frankl. Yeah, it's a great book, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's this quote, suffering ceases to be suffering when meaning is found. Now, one of the issues that I face, because I work a lot with people that have either had some form of adverse mental condition or simply want to take themselves to the next level, and quite regularly we'll get a person knocking on our door who's gone through every form of intervention and they're exhausted, like completely exhausted. So you're thinking physiologically, adrenally, digestively, everything is just synonymous with exhaustion. So there's this window of opportunity with them. And the thing that's constantly, time and time again, been demonstrated is two elements are missing, the emotional and the spiritual. Now, obviously, you know, being Ayurveda practitioners and everything, and taking that back to the Vedas and bring that Eastern philosophy in, we don't have to go to the East to realize meditation, everything you guys are providing. The West has done it in our esoteric teachings, from the Kabbalah, from Hermeticism. It's all there. And it's actually every single ancient tradition has a form of meditation. But at the same time, they had a deep spiritual element to them. So the emotional and the spiritual elements are the two constructs that I constantly am seeing missing. And the reason why I shifted in 18 short months, and I say short because I've never had a relapse of PTSD or depression. And so I'm an anomaly in the psychiatric world, and who don't actually have a definition of post-traumatic stress recovery or post-traumatic growth. So there's no consent. I've got two definitions from our work and from my personal journey. But anyway, that aside, if you don't realize that quite often we get to these situations and things look like a crisis because our emotional bucket's full. And we know this if we've ever gone ballistic over a trivial event, or we've got so emotional, we've cried a river over something that really, really wasn't that bad, or we've stopped ourselves doing something for fear of repercussions or what other people would think. I've just rattled off anger, sadness, fear, and shame. Now, shame has an ugly twin sister, which is guilt. So the ABS will tell us that the biggest killer of Australian society, I'm sorry, is not any virus that anyone's talking about at the moment. It is still between 15 and 44 of Australian men, suicide. And this social isolation, because depression and trauma are both isolative conditions, there will be a spike in suicide.
It's frightening, isn't it, to think what's going to play out.
But it doesn't have to be like this, because again, suffering ceases to be suffering when meaning is found. Meaning is the essence of spirituality. A transcendent meaning has to happen. I'm just talking about this. My whole system is buzzing right now. it's like we have to transcend the self to actually get the true meaning. And the lesson cannot be a negative thing against self.
Yeah.
I was working with a guy the other day, and he's been late to the call, and it's hilarious. Like, I know I can actually sit there and I'll do another 5-10 minutes of work before I know he'll come on, or if I've texted him, and he gets on really feeling guilty and ashamed and everything like that. And I said, cool, what's your lesson? He says, oh, I can't even remember the actual lesson, but it was a self-flagellating. In other words, it was a self-depreciating lesson. He was beating himself up. I said, it's not the lesson, brother. When you truly get a lesson in life, it will not be self-depreciating. It will be growth.
Yeah.
Growth. You'll be grateful.
And you'll know, because you'll forgive self, and you'll feel heart state, gratitude, compassion, love, all those. Yeah. You get it. So the moment people have come to this place, and nothing happens without a reason. So if we're looking at this as chaos, as traumatic, then it's an opportunity to go inside ourselves and say, what actually am I afraid of? Because, so often we'll say change. No one's afraid of change. It's an intangible. You can't be afraid of an intangible. What we're afraid of is that we won't have what it takes on the other side of change to survive or to thrive.
Adaptation.
Exactly. And so then I go, where do I start with that? Well, that's about me and capability. So therefore, where do I want to go? What's my next step? My next step is that, I go deeper and I understand from you guys and the Happy Mind Project, how to actually meditate properly, because I know that brings me mental stability. Awesome. Emotional literacy. I don't talk emotional intelligence, because where does intelligence live in the body? In the brain. So everyone goes to it. And I don't take or depreciate from Silvery, from Goldman, from the amazing people that do great work with the term emotional intelligence, Brene Brown. I recommend all of those people highly and strongly. We use emotional literacy, though, because you've got to read emotions. Anger is a beautiful emotion, but it's been labelled as negative because of the adverse consequences, or the negative consequences to the inappropriate expression of the emotion. So if you're losing it over a trivial event, then your anger bucket's full. If you're crying a river over everything at the moment, then your sadness bucket's full. And so it's about taking time and honoring that emotion to allow that emotion to flow, because we do now, cellular biologists are picking up what the ancient Chinese, and then before them, obviously the Vedas, knew that these emotions are stored at a cellular level within our body, and anger is stored within the liver and the gallbladder. When a person goes deep into anger out bush with me, or even here when we take them into it, I'll smell bile. Always will smell bile. And I know they've gone into their anger bucket and they're releasing it in a way in which no one is hurt, undermined, or demeaned in any way. And I've given the links that I sent you before in the chat. They're two anger videos, because back when I did this video, I couldn't work out how to put a 12-minute video onto a YouTube at once. So they're part 1 and part 2, but it's all about an appropriate use of a punching bag to release anger. And I talk about it in a lot of detail. So if you've been triggered by that, then take time and honor yourself by grabbing a punching bag or wrapping a doona up or a big cushion or pillow. Please don't use your bed, because it's energy, and there's energies flowing out of you. And so you want to put it outside or away. Yeah. Cool. I've done this work with my daughters from the age of 4. Matter of fact, Penny at the age of 7, when she got her knickers in a knot and had been a recalcitrant for 3.5 weeks, decided finally to own it, and comes up to me and says, "Dad, can you help me?" And I said, "How do you need my help?" She says, "Can you help me with an anger session?" I said, "Yep, let's go and do it." Now, I asked her, because of emotional literacy, I said, "Gorgeous, you're 7 and you get this. Can we do a little video and, show some people possibly on Facebook that around the world, that can understand it?" It's been seen by over 170,000 people. Oh, wow. And I constantly that's like 5 years ago, and I still get messages over that video because of her courage to actually demonstrate that.
So can we look at emotions as just tools and stuff? Like, as you said, they're not a negative experience. And I often refer to this when I'm teaching that, it's almost like if we're acting out of that stress state or one particular state, like we've got a little toolbox. And my dad had one of those, you'd walk into the garage and he had every single tool with a little diagram, one of those things, one of those guys that, everything in his place, and everything had to be put back in his place, and he'd never borrow a tool. He'd always go and buy his own tools. So he had one of those things where if you had a task at hand and you needed something, you could go and reference it. My toolbox is one of those little Kmart black things with a hammer and a nail in it, so to speak. And I often liken it to, if I'm in a stress state, or if we get into that stress state and we're relying just on one emotion, that's all we've got. But we might need creativity, love, and compassion in order to get ourselves out of this situation that we're in. Yet when we're acting out of, again, just that limited bandwidth capacity of those states, we can't access this nervous system, which we've all got, right? We've all got this amazing computer system, the most advanced software on the planet. And sometimes I'm sure we'd all go, I doubt that, but like, it's amazing. But when we're acting from that stress or that limited bandwidth, we lose access to, like, my dad's garage, where in this situation, I might need to use anger. I'm sure you'd agree there's times when we need to use these things. We might not get angry inside, but still having that ability to use those tools for those different emotions in different circumstances. Would that be kind of sit with what you've been saying there with those different states? They're not negative, and we need to use them and access them depending on what circumstances we're faced with.
You're breaking up a bit on that, but if I get the gist of what you've just asked me, is emotions are a toolbox used appropriately, they can really aid us. Is that the point of it?
Much more succinct.
You couldn't have said it better, mate. Yeah, is exactly right. Sadness is about loss. And if you're not feeling sadness at some level at the moment, I'm going to guarantee that you're numb to sadness. And it's time to grab some tissues and go and watch Marley and Me, that movie that, well, I haven't need to cry. I'll go and put that movie on. I don't need that movie anymore. I can access it. But as a guy who would have been previously labelled as an alpha male, the reason why I say previously labelled is I don't run on labels anymore. But I used to put that as one of my medals, being a supposed alpha male. I feared doing anger work in front of my daughters and crying in front of my daughters. Now, I did a video with my girls the other day, and we're just in the kitchen, and I just asked them, and the reason why they can emotionally connect to me is because they've seen me in every single state. They've seen me angry. They've seen me absolutely terrified. They've seen me feel ashamed. They've seen me feel guilty, and they've seen me cry a river. And they've watched me move through each one of those emotions and own them. And the wave comes and it peaks and then it dissipates. And at times, my family run on a rule. If you're suppressing emotion to the extent which you are acting in disrespect or irreverence to the family, anyone in the family can call you on it. So
that's cool.
My daughter, my young Penny, like, she's a Taurus, this is the bull at a gate. Dad, do you think you're being grumpy at the moment and might be suppressing something? You bloody well grumpy. But it's a beautiful system that was set up to allow each other to, go back to the basics as my family has done. Like, every night we'll sit in gratitude around the table before we eat, holding hand. Left hand held upwards so I can receive, and my right hand held downwards so I can give. And we go around and say at least one thing we're really grateful for. Remembering gratitude as a heart state, it actually shuts down the brain center, which has fear being emanated, which is what lots of people will talk about, including the Resonance Project and lots of awesome people out there doing work. So we do that, but at the same time, reverence and respect are the two, and responsibility. Personal responsibility, reverence and respect, 3 R's, that categorical in our family. But the other thing that we always teach in all our work, and the family know it, is that I only control 3 things in my life. And this is a great paradigm. If we're looking out there and we're going, the external world's just crazy talk. Cool. That's a perception. And it's based on just as an aside, it's based on a perception of not all knowledge. So you're judging a situation with not everything. You don't actually necessarily know what's going on completely. And the higher your level of spiritual integration means the more open your framework to see the world from a place of love, compassion, and gratitude. And realize that there is the law of polarity. Everything happens in poles. And at the moment, control and trust are the 2 poles which are really, really in our face. But coming back to this point, we control three things in life: our thoughts, our words, and our deeds. And no one can control them, but I can give another person a lot of influence over them to a point where I might believe that they can control it. If I have a need for Kirsty, my wife, to be in my life, then I'll feel if, I don't do this, that, and the other, she's going to walk out. She's controlling my thoughts, my words, my deeds. No. My need for her to be in my life means that I have allowed her to influence my thoughts, my words, my deeds to a point of I believe she can control them. No, she can't. That's a choice. So I don't need Kirsty in my life anymore. I'm just so humble and grateful that she actually, I woke up this morning and she's right next to me. And unless I do something dramatically weird within the next 12 hours or 10 hours, I'm going to guarantee that I'm going to go to sleep with her. So how honoured am I that that woman is choosing to be with me in my life. So I don't need her in my life though. And so she can blossom and become the biggest person she can. And I sit back I don't sit back because I work on myself all the time, but I enjoy the product of her continually growing. I'm not afraid of her growing or outgrowing. And we see a lot of people who come to do work, they go, oh, but what about my partner? I'm afraid that if I take the next step, I'll leave my partner behind. Well, if you're afraid of that, then there's some deep stuff there. And possibly if we flick this around, if you shift, you create a void in your relationship. The universe can't sustain a void, and all of a sudden they come and meet you. And all of a sudden your relationship is so much better. Two ways of looking at that thing. One gets us an outcome that we'd be really happy with. The other gets us with divorce. Which one do you want? So we create our reality by a level of allowance of ourselves to control our thoughts, our words, and our deeds. And then, yes, emotions is wrapped up into that, but I'll just talk about those three.
So right now on that, like, what would you suggest for people to be doing to take control of their inner worlds?
Turn off the 6 o'clock news. And I say that with I say that in two ways. Firstly, the way that the news is now presented through the use of colour, the use of sound, the use of visual, and use of influential language, you are being subjected to a whole heap of stuff you're not even realising. And this comes from a professional, the ability to use that stuff. So we've lost the art of critical thinking often. And I'm really sad that someone died in Sydney. Actually, no, I'm not really sad that someone died in Sydney, because I know that death is a natural cycle, and death is not the opposite of life. So many people think that death is the opposite of life. It's not. Birth is the opposite of death. And life consists of both death and birth, because I died, literally died. I needed to die and gave birth to who I am now. And it was a bloody big phoenix that went up in the ashes, because it was a big fire that went clouding big time. But I sit here smiling and laughing and so grateful and humble about that journey. And I would not change a single thing, not a thing. Not the day that I punched a wall in front of my daughter and knocked the cupboard door off when she was 2 years of age, and her eyes were like dinner plates and my wife was petrified. I wouldn't change that day, because that day went towards building me to a point where I had to own myself. So if the people that are coming to you, I'm going to guarantee, are ready for something, and that is to understand and get used to death. Because in our Western life, we've missed the boat. And our culture actually has a very different take on death. And that fear has a massive attachment. And Buddha talks about craving and aversion, if you've done Vipassana. So the craving and aversion, and it's all about attachment. So if you've got an attachment to death, the Tibetans do this beautiful, it's called Poa, conscious dying. And they do a meditation into death. You can even Google it, like YouTube, Tibetan meditation and dying. And it's a beautiful meditation in taking you into a process. Now in Bhutan, who has the Happiness Project, talk about that, they have the highest happiness register. By the age of 5 in their education curriculum, they have death being taught. So it's amazing.
Wow.
So that would be a really good thing right now in the time of a lot of sadness and introspection and flux. would be a great thing to, on one of your bookshelves, to have stuff on death that you're going to look into.
Mm.
But the biggest thing that we can do is, there's two ways, realistically, there's two ways to move forward. Now, Tony Robbins and all his awesome champions that were necessary to take us to this moment in time, the gurus, in my humble opinion, the age of the guru is now coming to an end.
Yeah.
And it needs to, for us to again ascend to the next level. They're really, really beneficial to bring us to where we are now. So we've got to, or I believe thanks is required to them. But that will teach you that, get really clear on your vision and go emotional into it, paint it with emotion, get really, really clear, bring it into my subconscious mind, embed it in there, and then let it go into the universe. Awesome. You've got so much stuff happening at the moment on a whole different multitude of frequencies and fields of consciousness into the universe at the moment, with multiple timelines shifting constantly, that to do that is to sow the seeds of uncertainty within yourself. So that's, in my old days in the military, it was set the objective and then what we used to call reverse engineering. And Richard, from your old way of life, would probably assume that you'd do something similar. And that's the objective we need to do. What do I need to achieve the objective?
What's the steps we need to take and follow on?
Exactly. There's another way. And this is the way that I suggest people become attuned to at the moment. And that is answering the deep question, who am I? And when I truly know who I am, less any external label, then I come to a place of going, cool. And now from the external world, how do I wish? What do I truly want to do in my expression of my being into the external realm? And then from that expression, what's my next step? So instead of going, where am I going? It's, where am I? And what's my next step?
There's a beautiful line from the Vedas: established in being, perform action, which is pretty much what you're saying. Come into self and then just move. You don't have to sort of go out there and figure it all out, because you just take that right action based on that deeper state of being. So that's beautiful.
They were pretty wise dudes, the Vedas.
Oh, mate, as you said, if you go back to all those great old spiritual traditions and all these great wise masters from all different avenues of the planet, they're all saying pretty much the same thing, weren't they? But and there's one thing I definitely want to come back to, because I think it's going to be in this melting pot environment that we're in the first couple of moments we're chatting about, you said cohabitating, which in isolation mode, there are going to be a lot of families that, you know, are normally so used to going, hey, I'll see you later tonight. And then I'll get home, then I'm going to go for a surf, and then I'll go have a few beers with the boys, or then you're going out to watch movies, I'll see you later. All of a sudden it's like, no, we are confined into this space. And I know you and your beautiful wife do so much work with couples and stuff. So if we could, you know, I know time's sort of running out a little bit, but if what advice would you give for people that are now 24/7 almost, stuck in close quarters and throwing kids and teenagers and all that, and you know, other than go into the emotions, and get a punching bag, what else could you give us as tools and techniques to deal with this crazy?
Quick side story before I answer that question. I was working with a couple down in Victoria, and they're a farming couple, and they're awesome. Like, he would achieve more before morning tea on a Monday than most people would in an entire week. A knockabout guy. Kirsty got him to do yoga for the first time, and when they came to this retreat, and he was really, really sore, and his wife goes, I'm sorry about Mark. And she goes, he put a sledgehammer through his kneecap 2 weeks ago. Had been a doctor, like, hard as nails guy. Anyway, convinced him to like caramel lattes now, you know, so just stepping outside his understanding what masculinity is. But when we taught them the anger stuff, and you know, she was the one who got very angry. He'd walk into the house after a big day's work on the property and just feel it, and he'd just point to the shed. And that was the communication signal. Okay, things are up too much, go and let it out, then come back. Don't care what you're doing right now. And so that brings me to my first point. Communication's key. And so many people think they communicate, but they don't. It's really, really important to understand that communication is not about speaking. It's also about listening. So you've got this incredible opportunity now to know your partner from a completely, you know, deeper level and more connected level than ever before. And it's been beautifully gifted to you by stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not communicating about, what needs to happen around the house and everything like that, because the kids have come back, lots of people are homeschooling now. I think that's hilarious. There's a meme the other day of the skeleton sitting there with a cigarette, and it says, "The length of time I've been waiting for American society to acknowledge that homeschool mums work a lot." And everything's happening within the family. But one guy that just came out of the bush with me, he's in the financial markets, and so he works generally from 7 till 7. So he's now working from home from 7 till 7. There's a number of things that are out of whack there, and prioritization of his work effort is one of the big things. Personal boundaries is the other big thing, and he constantly takes more work on because the other people in his mind are incompetent and they don't do it well enough. But the other thing is he feels he will benefit in time. So his linear time frame is that I'll keep just sacrificing myself in the present moment and I will gain benefit later. That's been demonstrated to be completely collapsing in all forms of work and business environments, etc. So the other thing is, if you really took the practicalities of it, give yourself a heart attack tomorrow. What do you care about, actually bringing it in? And seeing the Grim Reaper numerous times in my life taught me that. Taught me about my prioritization in this moment is really key. But communication about that active listening between the two of you to go, so what do we need to achieve together? And really setting that out and understanding how people are feeling. Kirsty and I will probably, 10 times a day, ask the one question, how are you feeling? And that gets a deep response. It's, with a cup of tea. I love my cups of tea, and we'll sit down and have a cuppa and say, how are you feeling, right? Beautiful, Carly. Yeah. Yours got a beautiful handle though, I noticed. So communication is key. And then the personal boundaries are really, really important. So often having a place for the kids to actually do their work, and that designated place, and then you having a designated place in the house if you don't have a study or whatever like that, that can really help. But a routine of sorts. When I started working for myself 10 years ago, I really struggled. So I went into a standard routine. In the morning, we got the girls, back then they were going to school. So we got them, I would meditate in the morning and I would do exercise in the morning. And that was all before 7 o'clock. And in those hours, so I was rising at 5, meditate for an hour, and then exercising for an hour. And we would tag team. So one day one would go outside, the other one would stay and do yoga, and then the next day that would alternate. And the girls knew that was mum and dad's time before 7 o'clock. You can come in, you can give me cuddles. If I'm meditating on the couch, come in and snuggle into my blanket, but please don't interrupt my meditation. So again, those personal boundaries were instilled. And remember, Penny was less than 3 so I'm not talking about 11, 12-year-old that I can say, no, this is my time. I'm talking about a person that I had to train and hold my boundaries for some time before it became, cool, I'm not coming out of meditation now, I'm just getting a snuggle. And then, between 7 and 9 was getting the girls focused and everything like that. And then come 9 o'clock, or when I'd sit down, I'd meditate. And I would meditate for 15 minutes, and it would be a different form of meditation. And it was a mind clearing and an activating meditation, a focused meditation. And then I'd come out of that and I'd already have my to-do list, my task list, and I'd review my task list to get a cognitive understanding of the framework of the rest of my day. Then I'd go through, now I still, there we go, I still do task lists. And I still tick off, I write in blue, I don't like black anymore, and I tick them off in red so that I get that actual acknowledgement, the gratitude for achieving and going through. Now that list started at there yesterday and went to there by about 15 minutes after my meditation. But it doesn't matter. It gets ticked off, and then go through the day and then finish the day. So many people, when they work from home, there's no end to the day. The computer's just there or whatever. But having a seal off for the day, and a little ceremony I used to do where, again, I just recenter myself, and then I go back over my task list and I acknowledge what I achieved or hadn't achieved. Notice that the list just grew today. Cool. Now, I'd review that list and I'd go, anything that's been on that list for over a week, got to ask the question why it's still there. Either I'm believing that it's really important, and the world's going to fall apart, or it actually, I've got an emotional block which is not allowing me to achieve that task. Generally, one of the two things would happen, and so then I would take action on that specific thing. So routine was really good in employing personal boundaries. And remember, you don't teach personal boundaries; you give an example of them. That's how we teach, is just by personifying them ourselves. And then communication, and having little communication strategies that work for you, be that morning brew, or be that moment in time, can be really, really beneficial too, because you are now shifting, and that shift, depending on how well you make it, will determine your future outcome.
Beautiful. So use the time wisely, and don't let it just float around.
Focus, remember, a 100-watt light bulb lights up a room. A 100-watt laser cuts it in two. Mm-hmm. And what I've worked out over my 10 years of we now run a national charity. So I'm the director of a national charity, as well as having my daughters at home all the time. Plus when they're out there running around doing other things. And I have a lot of other stuff that I do. So we have a number of moving parts to our life. I work less now than I've ever done, but I'm really, and I love coming on and supporting people like you guys, and I give of my time constantly, because that's why I'm on the planet, is to help and to share. So I've got a lot of these things which are competing. How can I still be really, really effective? Actually, be far more effective now than ever before, is getting really, really clear on who I am and where's my next step. And then allowing that next step to continue. And as with the Resilient Leaders Foundation, which is our charity, it is a vehicle for us to express ourselves in the world. So if that vehicle gets in the way of me at my expression into the world, which includes me being balanced and being a heart-centered individual in the world, then the vehicle must leave. The vehicle must be modified, because it's now polluting as opposed to assisting in the transport. And so, we go back to principles and values constantly. I do that more than every quarter. Go back. Who am I? What do I truly stand for? And through that standing for, how do I express myself in the world? I'm constantly asking that question. As a matter of fact, this afternoon, I've allocated journal time to go back and ask that same question. So this afternoon, I'll be going back to the basics. And then in times where there's so much uncertainty, I learned this in conflict and combat, where I had, normally in the military, you would analyze the enemy and you'd make up what's called a red-centric or an enemy-centric plan. What happens if you've got no information on the enemy? And I developed this concept called blue-centric planning, where all I can do is know myself and what I truly want and be balanced to the actual outer world. Unbeknownst to me, in a very unconscious realm of conflict, I was actually setting myself up for a practice to actually be, some 10 years later.
Awesome. Any questions at all, Carly?
No, other than I might be in touch with you regarding my 10-year-old son soon.
We just had to, we run a rite of passage, and I've just made a conscious decision to put, it's about in 2 weeks' time, we're going to run it. And I could run it. Then I realized why. Am I fighting? Do I need to have it? Do I have to have it on a linear timeline? All the parents want us to run it. And so I've got this balance that's occurring right now, where I'm telling them the program's running and we're with you. And so I'm actually, what I'm doing, and you mentioned the Young Warrior program, Richard, and what I'm doing with the parents is sending them video updates, messages, to just let them know what's happening, and constantly give them tips to go, because right now they actually need the Young Warrior more than ever, because it's a family, it's really morphed into a family project. So so I don't make that decision lightly, but at the same time, I know it's actually the right decision for the grander scheme of things.
I can certainly vouch for sending my son along to. Of course, James, that was epic. He did get a punching bag, but the problem is he's far bigger and stronger than I am. So I've got to take it back seat. But no, so if people want to, the Resilient Leadership Foundation is the main hub. Is that correct?
Resilient Leaders Foundation. And if you want to connect with us, then Facebook, James Greenshields, or my wife is Kirsty Greenshields. We're on Facebook as those two, or we've got a resilientleadersfoundation.org is the website, or just the Facebook page, Resilient Leaders Foundation. And we often, like, I'm putting videos on there constantly on Facebook just to, I don't actually believe there's a crisis at the moment. I believe there's a shift in circumstance at the moment. And that allows me to actually perceive with a level of balance, cognitively, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So don't expect it to be too many reactive videos. They're generally videos that come from me working constantly with people and getting what's going on for them at the moment. And if I feel that has a message of resonance to a broader community, and I'll put it on go online with it. So yeah, there's a lot of videos there that could help a lot of people when I talk about everything we've talked about and more. So yeah, it's a free resource. Please use it.
Obviously, with the amount of wisdom you've got, mate, we could be sitting here all day and just mindful of your to-do list. I don't want to blow that. Right. That was amazing, and you're an amazing guy. I think you're just what's needed out there in the world in these sort of times. And as you said, just choose the story, choose the narrative, and I love that little shift, those shifts of perception and how powerful they are. And I think you're a testament to that. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Very honoured. And great to meet you, Carly, although it's been an e-meet.
Thank you. We'll speak again. Thank you.
Alrighty, guys. Thank you. See you next time.
Thanks.
See ya. Bye.